Sorry, I was just saying, having it so that Morpheus dies, the Morpheus basically sacrifices himself to save Neo, to get back to Zion. And, now Neo and Trinity make it back. Morpheus is dead. Neo has to assume the role of the leader. So now you've got, now you've got problems in meat space, which are much more interesting than cyberspace because Neo has all these amazing powers. It means, we might have to cut a lot of these amazing gunfights, the highway, the freeway chase, the big fight in the chateau. All these things, these are all things that were forced in there. These are things because, they wanted to have cool gun battles. They wanted to have, cool stuff, cool stuff, cool stuff. Lots of these cool scenes that they just kind of shoehorned in there. They forced it to happen. And yes, they are cool, but in the end, the story kind of got undermined. A lot of people just got shell shocked. So the problem is that they ran out of. The problem with the Matrix, with the fight in cyberspace, is that um, Neo Neo has the ability to change things in the Matrix, but now I think what would be important was that um, the problem with the Matrix in the second and third episodes was that all the problems were of the same type. There are actually different types of problems that a person can, has to solve. I believe there were nine types, roughly nine types of problems. There are the problems that occur on the level of the innermost self. There's problems of the body. That means when things are attacking you directly, when your own body is, if you're crippled, if you're injured, problems with your own body, problems of being hungry, those are all problems of the body. Problems of the mind, being insane, being afraid of something in particular, having a particular hang up, having a predisposition to something, those are problems of the mind. Problems where you just can't seem to get along with people. That is a problem of the mind. Then there are problems of emotions. People have emotional problems all the time where their emotion overrules their logic, or they're unable to use their emotions to communicate with other people properly. They can't they have such bad sense of emotions that they're terrible conversationalists. So these are problems that happen on the innermost level. Those would be emotions, mind, and body. On the next level, on the interpersonal relationship level, you have problems with friends, family, and lovers. So, you can have a lover's quarrel. You can have, a spat between him and Trinity, arguing over who wants to be on top or whatever. You've got problems with friends. Here's the thing is that he gets to Zion, and people are saying, what, Morpheus, great Morpheus, sacrificed himself, and we lost a ship for this wimpy guy, Neo. You know, there, problem with friends. He has to find a way to make friends with all of these people. People might know that he's the one, but they don't necessarily like the guy. I mean, he's fresh out of the two. He was a copper top, moment, just a few days ago. Do they really trust him that quickly? Earning their trust, friends. And so you have your, lovers, friends, and oh shoot, what was the last one? Just other people, I guess. Other people in society. I believe that's what it was. So actually that can be problems. That could be right. Maybe it's just acquaintances. But anyway, that could those problems could be things like having to deal with the superiors of Zion because he's not necessarily given the key to the city. He might have to deal with the mayor of Zion. These are certain things. There might be then finally you have the last level. You've got problems with society. He might have problems with a societal institution. He's got a problem with the societal institution of Zion. There are problems with the environment, the external environment. So, that could be, any kind of environmental hazard, volcanoes erupting. Hey, I mean, they're in the center of the earth. There's geothermal cores and, the city is right next to the geothermal core. For all we know, he might have to go and, deal with some of these problems. These are problems that occur in meat space, not necessarily in the matrix. Um, those are interesting things that occur. And then, having to deal with an individual that runs, a society. So, there are all these different problems that were unexplored, um, that they didn't deal with. These things can take place within Zion. They can take place during his little travels in the Matrix. He can be with other people, but they don't necessarily see him as all that in a bag of chips. He could be fighting with his comrades, or soon to be comrades in the Matrix. So these are things that they could have done. A lot of writing a story is about just going with the flow and not forcing things, and just staying out of the way, really, because it is a logical process. It's a logical process, and it's about having intent, action, and result. Then we can look at something like, say, Star Wars. Star Wars, the first episodes, well, not the first episodes, but I mean the episode 4, 5, and 6, the first ones that came out, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. These ones were much more. These ones did a lot better because you've got, in the first one, A New Hope, you've got Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker, farm boy. He knows about the about the rebellion. He knows about all these great things. He wants to go out and join the rebellion, but he's a farm boy. He's stuck at home. He wants to leave home. He even when he meets Obi-Wan Kenobi, and learns all these interesting things, it's still not the inciting incident, because at this time he's still stuck having to, go help on the farm with his Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. So it's not until the Empire, comes in search of the droids and kills off his aunt and his uncle that, now he has nothing holding him back. And, that's the end of the first act. That's what launches him, on his quest. Um, well, his next quest is really to get back to the rebellion, to get these droids back to the rebellion. But on the way, they're captured by the Death Star. They rescue the princess. Obi-Wan Kenobi is killed by Darth Vader. That's and finally they make it back to the rebellion. So right there they have the end of the second act. And maybe there weren't any critical decisions there, except maybe for Obi-Wan. Um, but then, they have to go and they have to destroy the Death Star. So, this is where Luke really finds out that this is where he really gets in touch with with the Force. So, the problem with the first, the prequel trilogy is that they don't have much of that. They keep jumping from person to person. I don't think they failed. I think they failed greatly in making Anakin ever seem like he wanted anything. They just had him do these things. They put him into a pod race. Why does he want this pod race anyway? Why does he? What's driving him to do it? Um, and he just seems to be caught up in all of this mess. What's he doing in a fighter? Being caught in the middle of these gun battles, and it's just a lot of. I want to, I feel that George Lucas just wanted to have. I want to have a lot of cool scenes. I want to have a lot of cool aliens. I want to have all these amazing gun battles, and just throwing your protagonist in the middle of them. It really didn't work. It became boring, and the reason why it became boring was because um, we never had a protagonist with a real intent. Uh, you know, doing things to fulfill those intents and seeing the results and having to deal with the results, because this is how real life is. We need a protagonist that we can step into the shoes of and experience all the problems, and we have to want the same things that the protagonist is going to want. And we are going to experience these things with the protagonist. And the problem is that George Lucas had created all of these experiences but failed to have a protagonist that really set these things in motion, really had a big you know had a really big impact on the turnover of these events. If anything, Anakin Skywalker seemed to win by luck. He won the pod race by luck. He was up there in the space station shooting. He won by luck. It's called Deus Ex Machina. He had no skill. He didn't really have any effect.